If you listen to the show, you already know that we cannot exist without our sponsors. They are the ones who make things happen behind the scenes. So let's acknowledge Fuji Sports. We've been working with these guys for a while now, not only as far as this podcast is concerned, but also at the Roll Academy. We've had their gear. I personally use their gis. What a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I mean, Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, MMA, tape, bags, anything you need for your Jiu-Jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk Roll TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at Roll Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armin Fati, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there are so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, you know, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code ROLLRADIO at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rollacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. Today's guest joins us to discuss the mental and physical balance in jiu-jitsu, focusing on making time for oneself, the responsibility of a jiu-jitsu instructor, the importance of taking competition seriously while still having fun, and more. Here's the Roll Radio with a Masters Nogi World Champion and instructor at Carlson Gracie Team Murrieta, Celeste Cronin.
Welcome to Roll Radio.
And we are live. Celeste, Professor, how are you? Great to see you. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we were able to do this. We were not so successful last time.
I know.
Lots of stuff going on, and I'm glad
Part
that
of
we were
being a
able to
mom.
connect.
Yeah,
I
part
know.
of being a mom.
I know that takes up a lot of your effort, a lot of your time. So I'm glad that you were able to join me here today. And Gary's not here with us today. Normally it would be a trio conversation, but we'll chat a little bit about your life and everything. So let me just start very simply. How is the mom life? How is the black belt life? How is the martial artist life? There's a lot of things going on in your life. As you look at your Instagram feed, there's a lot. There's a lot going on over there.
I know. There is. So, let's see. I have two teenagers from a previous marriage, Celine, who's 19, and then my 15-year-old Gigi. So I have teenagers transitioning into adulthood. One's in high school, and that's like a whole roller coaster ride of its own. And then because that wasn't enough, my husband and I, who recently got married, had a baby as well. She's Nova and 18 months old. So yeah, my time is limited, to say the least.
Between both of them, all three of them,
All
right? I mean,
three of
there's
them. Yeah.
the teenagers introduce different dynamic, while the little one is
Totally.
just starting this whole path, right?
It's a really fun stage. So, with all that going on, and training is not a little bit of a challenge. It is a challenge. So I'm just trying to enjoy it, because I know this toddlerhood time is really short. And so because I've done this before, my my girls were 8 and 4 when they started. When I started, my littlest was 2. So she's been on the mat forever, her whole life. So I kind of know how it goes now. So I'm very excited and blessed to be doing it all again. But that means my training is on the back burner because I'm busy and time is limited. And then my husband is also the owner and head instructor at the academy. So we have to like split our time and our training and juggle all that.
Some of the sacrifice that we have to make
Uh-huh.
for the next generation, right?
Yes, for sure.
I can't help myself to see the pictures, the huge photographs you have right behind you.
Yeah.
Is that testimonial that you have? Oh, there's 3 of them. Yes.
Yeah.
Is that a testimonial that your entire life is just submerged into jiu-jitsu?
You know, it wasn't always. I feel like now it is because my husband has an academy, but I'm in our game room right now. So this is just a small part of our house. And yeah, it's a big part of our lives. So I felt like this was the perfect space to really showcase that
Talk
part
to
of
me.
our lives.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because sometimes when we do jiu-jitsu so much, we teach, we are involved, we support, and so on. Sometimes we want to disconnect the home life from it, not to be overwhelming. On the other cases, it is just so embedded into everything that we do that is just everywhere. Where do you find yourself?
Closer to everywhere. I try really hard to take myself out of the jiu-jitsu world a little bit. So I've always been huge on weightlifting and yoga and fitness in general. And I feel like that's my time. Although those things kind of supplement jiu-jitsu, I feel like that's my time getting my mind away from jiu-jitsu and all of that.
Is that fulfill that need for jiu-jitsu, or is this intentional separation to keep yourself sane, in a sense, for lack of a better term here?
To keep myself sane and separate. Yeah, I love going to yoga right now. I've been doing yoga a lot since having the baby. And it's just one of my favorite places because I don't have to think about jiu-jitsu. It's like time to myself. And I know that it's good for me and something I need. And it's definitely separate. I get to show up and be a student, not the teacher. So that's really nice too.
That's often an underestimated topic, right? Like a lot of students come to see you or your husband or whoever instructor there is, and they just want to be there all the time, versus you are talking about, I need that me time. I need that separation. Like, I love this. This is my life. But like that me time is so important. What do you think is so important about that me time for you?
It gives your mind a break from, I love jiu-jitsu, so I can be like a maniac about it sometimes. And I think about it all the time, and so it's important to shut that off and to like give your mind a breather and come back with a refreshed mindset. I feel like sometimes it's an asset to be thinking and obsessing about it all the time, but I think it's really important to take care of ourselves. And part of that means like taking the time away and doing something else for our mind and our body and things like that.
Is that exclusive to instructors or business owners in jiu-jitsu business type, or is this applicable all across everywhere? In other words, should our students be thinking in the same categories where training jiu-jitsu is great, but you also got to do something else?
I think to each his own. I have always done this. So before I married my husband, I was a student. I did a little bit of teaching, but I was mainly a student, and I still did this for myself. So I think it's important for students who are like obsessed about jiu-jitsu or spend a lot of time at the academy. We all know you have those students, right, that show up twice a day that you see all the time. So they need it too, I think, and especially for taking care of our bodies, but our mind is just as important. So if it's not yoga, if it's, some kind of form of art or something to give yourself like a little bit of a break, I think that's important for everyone, not just gym owners, but especially people who own gyms or are at the academy all the time.
You bring up the mental and physical health, and oftentimes one of them is the visible one, obviously.
Yeah.
And the mental health is being ignored, and we get sometimes overwhelmed. How important is that for you, especially now, since you have a little one, you have teenagers, you have business that's, being run, you teach, you train, like there's a lot going on in your life. How important is that balance of physical and mental stability for you?
the mental is the most important part. So everything else that I do, I feel like is to make sure that the mental is taken care of. I want to be happy. I want to be in a good mood. I want to make sure that like giving off good energy when I'm at the academy. Or even when I go to yoga or the grocery store, you know, because I have a lot going on. So the mental is a muscle we can't see, but the most important one, and the most important one, not just in life, but especially like competitors and young athletes, you know. I feel like you have to have your mind and your home life good if you want to have success in your goals.
Yeah, that's the key, right? We can't make,
Mhm.
especially in jiu-jitsu, where, well, let me ask you this. Do you find jiu-jitsu more physically or mentally stimulating? Which one is trumps the other one? Like, that's the ongoing, never-ending conversation in jiu-jitsu, but I'm curious where your mind is on that.
I would say definitely in the beginning, through the colored belts and especially the white belt, for me it was mental. That's why I enjoyed it. I had just graduated college. I was looking for something to do. I had like a little bit of a time in between. I was planning on going to law school, but I didn't score high enough on the LSAT the first time. So I got that year break. And for me, it was mental because I wasn't in school anymore. I got to kind of relax, and it was more of a mental challenge than physical challenge for me. Now I'm older. Of course, I'm still learning. I'm a black belt. I'm learning all the time. But in order to mentally challenge myself, I feel like I have to really study techniques that are new to me. And so that doesn't happen as often because I'm really busy. So now it's a physical thing. So I go train, and I used to be super excited about, oh, okay, what am I going to learn today? And now I'm kind of like, okay, here we go. We're going to sweat for an hour and a half, you know? So it's definitely more physical now.
Could also the fact that you're more teaching versus training or learning, like there's the switch that takes place the moment we take on responsibility of sharing that information. Now I feel like sometimes we not necessarily stop learning, but it becomes it is a different dynamic, isn't it?
A totally different dynamic. So I'm really lucky that, you know, my husband teaches the majority of all the classes. I'm kind of in there right now because I have the baby when I can. So I do a couple classes, but not too much. And of course, I have to fill in when I can. But still, I'm not really studying jiu-jitsu. I come into spar and that's it because, you know, I have the baby now. So I'm not really studying as much anymore. But the shift from teaching all the time has been great. It's also mentally stimulating because you're learning how to effectively teach. And then, you know, going to the competitions, you get to see like, okay, what's working, what's not working. So that's kind of fun and mentally stimulating for me. But it is a huge shift. It's a change for sure.
Did you find that challenging when you were starting to teach, when you were getting involved in that part of it? Was that a big change of like, knowing jiu-jitsu is one thing, but knowing how to teach jiu-jitsu, that's a very different skill, right?
Totally. Totally.
And I feel like, and tell me what you think about this, but I feel like many underestimate that. Many think like once you get this purple, brown, you know, even black belt, like if I think many feel that now it's time for me to teach. But that part, the act of teaching, oftentimes is not so easy, right?
For sure. It isn't easy. I think some people are a little more natural at it than others, right? Some are teachers and some are not teachers. So the ones who are not teachers is like, okay, now it's a skill you're going to have to develop. For me, because I was, you know, because I'm a fitness trainer and I was a school teacher before, I felt like the transition to teaching what I know is pretty easy. It's, for me, the most challenging part is developing a good class format, you know, in the beginning, developing a good class format that works with what you're teaching or what you're trying to accomplish for that class. So I feel like that part is overlooked even by experienced teachers. But being able to teach the skills, I feel like I've had a pretty easy time interpreting, but developing engaging class formats to deliver those techniques, I feel like I'm still trying to be creative, and I feel like that's something that there's kind of room for everybody to grow and build, right?
Elaborate a little bit more on that, because I feel like a lot of students, especially at the earlier ranks, they feel like as instructors we just show up, there's a technique, let's just spin it off the hip, and then let's beat the crap out of each other, and like life is good and everybody's happy, but there's more to all of this, isn't it?
Way more. You have to remember you're developing white belts into blue belts. How do you want to do that? And sometimes you're in a room where there's higher belts also. So it's about managing, how you're going to progress each belt, so that I think is a struggle. Definitely of my husband's, not mine. Because he has the responsibility of delivering the whole education, where I just show up, I teach a class, or I'm teaching this day, and that's it. It's over. I don't have to worry about rank or education or the responsibility of the student. So I'm kind of having a good time, but I could see that being a huge challenge, especially probably for you and people who have to come up with the curriculum for the whole school. That is like a huge responsibility,
It certainly is. I mean, based on, think of it as it's a subset of lessons, right? That we carry on to the students, and then you're entrusting in, if there's multiple instructors, then you're entrusting others into following the system that you believe in.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's the
And
hard
then
part, right?
even more the pressure, not the pressure, but the responsibility of like the kids, now you have parents trusting you with the education of their most prized, thing in their life. So yeah, it's a huge responsibility.
You used the phrase of education multiple times in the last few minutes, and many don't consider learning jiu-jitsu as education. You come from education background. How do you correlate those two? Your traditional schooling, and then this untraditional schooling that we have on the mat, right?
It's a skill that you're developing, just like that of a pilot or anybody else who's studying the skill of any kind of art, photography, or all the varieties of martial arts. So it is an education. You're going from like a novice to a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And by the end of it, you have a whole lot of knowledge that you've acquired through the process of education. So it is, I feel like, should be treated a little more formal than sometimes it is.
Do you think that informal approach that we often see at academies, this very casual kind of, let's roll, let's just flow roll, whatever it is, does that set us back as far as the success and our development in jiu-jitsu?
That's an interesting question. Overall, I would say yes. Those schools tend to be, from my personal experience, a little smaller, right? I think at any academy, you're going to have like a shining star or two, because jiu-jitsu is unique in the way of being able to create, and not necessarily create, but discover things on your own through training. There's a lot of students who come from schools or teachers, that might not be the best, but they've really developed maybe beyond their instruction, because they've just trained so much and they're so natural and talented, and they've discovered so much on their own from training. So
I feel like that happens no matter what at some point or another. I mean, I would say somewhere around purple belt, probably we start pivoting into this jiu-jitsu curiosity, where we go beyond what's being shown. We experiment a little bit. Nobody's going to tell us no, and it becomes more fun. Speaking of that, which rank was the most enjoyable for you?
The most enjoyable for me was brown belt.
How come?
Brown belt, because that's when I really started competing a lot alongside my husband. And I feel like that developed my jiu-jitsu the most. That's when I also had the most success in competition. I don't know if that's because I was competing more, or because I just really found a game that I was having success with. And I wasn't training as much. At one point, I was competing more than training. So I didn't really put pressure on myself. I just knew, like, okay, this is my hobby. I love it. And I just want to do my best. So there was no more fear of losing, and that's when I felt like I really started to learn and really become a black belt.
But that's such an interesting comment that you're making, because many out there say, well, listen, you want to compete, if you want to win, if you want to be good at this, you need to take this seriously. And you are going the opposite direction, where you're saying, this is just a hobby.
Mhm.
I don't want to take this seriously. I just want to kind of flow this. I want to enjoy this time. I feel like there's a little, conflict there, isn't it? Like, how are you processing this in your mind?
Yeah. So I'll clear that up for sure. So I feel like if you want to be a professional and you're an adult competitor, there's no way around the fact that you have to train like a professional and take it really serious. But I'm a master's, and at the brown belt, I started competing at masters, and I think I no longer had the pressure of, okay, I have to make sure I'm training like X, Y, and Z so I can have these results. So without that pressure, I feel like that's when I really honed in my mental strength and had fun. And I think it is about having fun. So for masters competitors, I feel, like if you want to continue to develop your skills as quickly as possible and really challenge yourself, then compete. And a lot of people don't want to because they feel like they don't have the time to train. But, in the masters division, you're getting people who train. Sure, you're getting some gym owners, right, that train 100 times a week and they have, experience competing at adult. But sometimes you're just getting those people who train a couple days a week like you, and they just do it for fun and it's a hobby for them. And that should, they belong there too.
So talk to me a little bit more about that interesting dynamic that takes place. Because from one side, this should be fun. The moment this becomes a chore, that's when we quit. That's when we give up, right? At the same time, many students, and I'm sure some of yours too, go into the competition and they really want to perform. They want to do well. Nobody goes there to lose. Like, nobody's says, I'm gonna go and then, like, I don't care what happens. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody wants to lose.
No,
right?
We want to do our best.
Exactly.
I hope.
Right. So it's so difficult to let go of this thought, I'm just going to have fun, especially at the earlier stages of competition. Isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. So, that's the thing, is like, I want to have fun. Winning is fun. So I want to find a way to win,
Yeah.
I want to bring my best and do my best, of course. But that's not, if we want to put our best foot forward, we know, okay, we have to train 5 to 8 times a week or whatever it is. But if you can't do that and you're holding yourself back because you can't do those things, I think, do it anyway. You have the experience of training already, and not everybody has the time to do that. So instead of putting that added pressure, just go have fun with the mentality and mindset of like, look, do your best, try to win, try to find a way, because losing isn't fun, but it's also an opportunity, just like competing itself is, to improve and get better. And I think there's a huge difference in somebody who competes and trains, whether it's recreational or not, and somebody who doesn't compete at all.
Surely is. And not only jiu-jitsu. Like, I've noticed a big difference even just in personality and life. The ability to make decisions under stress when we are conflicting, because that's what we're doing. We're conflicting with the other person. And same thing, tell me, do you feel that there's a big difference between sparring session at the academy with your peers and then going and competing out there? Even though the environment might be the same, but it's such a huge difference, isn't it? It's
a huge difference. And the environment is different because the person's focused on one thing, and that's themselves and winning, of course, I don't want to hurt anyone in competition, but the emphasis is a little less on your safety because now you can go as hard as you can and there's a referee that's going to save the other person. It's no longer your responsibility. So, yeah, they're going a lot harder and it's more realistic.
You know, you bring up a good point. I never thought about that way. When we are at our own place, we have the responsibility to take care of our training partners. And I have to tell this to my students, your job so they don't get hurt. But when we go out there, we have the safety net, which is at the referee. So we no longer have to, I suppose, have the safety net that we have to slow down. This is what allows us to propel forward, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Let's take this back a little bit.
Okay.
You talked about your college life. You talked about you started jiu-jitsu because you had some free time. Why jiu-jitsu? Why this, not something else? Do you remember your first day?
I do. I was terrified. I actually started with a friend, one of my really good friends, and we both went and she hated it and I just loved it. And she just looked at me like, man, you're a little weirdo. But I grew up in a wrestling house. My brother wrestled. All his wrestling friends were always over. I got to go to all of his wrestling meets and I was always like so inspired and I always wanted to do it so bad. But when I was in high school, girls didn't really wrestle. I think there was one girl on my brother's wrestling team and I just didn't want to be the only girl, to sink the ship, really, because I just remember watching her. And although I thought, she was great and amazing, I think she lost like every match. And in wrestling, in high school, it's a team sport. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that, So when I had the opportunity as an adult to go try out jiu-jitsu, I was like, oh, this is so awesome. I can do this as a hobby. And it was a lot like wrestling. And I was
Hold on a second. Did you know what jiu-jitsu is before you tried it? I
did because I had a friend. Well, the UFC was like super popular back then, and I was like really into it. And jiu-jitsu in the beginning, especially.
What year is this? I don't want to date you or anything. Like I don't want to put a date on you, but like I'm curious from a timeline.
2011, 2012.
Okay. So you know what jiu-jitsu is. You have an idea of what UFC is. At this point, 2011, that's jiu-jitsu is pretty. I mean, I'm sorry, UFC is pretty popular at that point, right? Walk me through that conversation with your friend. Like, hey, let's go do some jiu-jitsu. Like, how does that take place? First of all, you guys are two females. That's one. You're trying to walk into a male-dominated sport, right? I don't want to like create segregation, but that's the truth, right? Like the ratio of men and women in jiu-jitsu is such a large still. It's growing, but it's still big difference. Especially back then. Right?
We were the only ones.
Right. So like you have this crazy idea. Okay, let's go do this stuff. Okay. Like how does this conversation take place between you and your friend?
Okay, so what happened is I was on a field trip with my daughter, my oldest daughter, and one of the dads was a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And we were talking about the kids training and all that. And he had daughters and they trained. And I was like, man, no way. This is so cool. So he told me that he had practiced, that there was women who did it, and he painted a picture of like, okay, so there's just a bunch of adults co-ed, like this sounds like fun. And so that's how I talked my friend into doing it. We arrived and we were like, hold on a second. And it turns out like this women's class, or the idea of women in here, was something they were planning for the future. It didn't exist yet. But they had just recently had an influx of women, which was me, my friend, and a couple other ladies. So it was just a unique situation that kind of just unfolded on its own.
So you step on a mat with your friend, very first time. You have this very different idea of what this is going to look like. Anybody in the world probably would say, screw this. This is nonsense. But but somehow you're attracted to it in some sense. There is some kind of attraction to this act of jiu-jitsu. What's in your mind after this first class? Like you going through this engagement, and obviously we all have different experiences here, right?
Yeah. First I walk in and when I realized I was so out of place, I got really nervous quickly. My hands were shaking. So when we circled up to sit on the mat, there was no warm up. We just went straight to the technique. I had to sit on my hands because I was so nervous. My hands were shaking because I felt so out of place. As the class went on,
Is it gi or no gi? Sorry to interrupt you. Is it gi
it
or no
was
gi?
gi, yeah,
Okay.
but we didn't have gis, so then it was even more awkward.
Okay. So you singled out essentially. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but everybody had a gi, and my friend and I were just Nogi, and there was a couple black belts on the mat, and one of them kind of pulled us to the side and started helping us and teaching us the techniques and kind of giving us like a little intro course on the side.
Okay.
And the stuff that he showed us, we were both able to do, and I had a lot of fun, and I was like, okay, this is fun. I can totally do this. My friend hated it. Never wanted to come back, but I was like, no, I want to learn. So then I convinced my brother to come with me because I was still super nervous.
Is the brother the one who wrestled?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm really interested.
So he was stoked. He was a wrestling coach at the high school still.
Okay.
We were still pretty young. I was 25 and he's only a couple years older than me. So we were super stoked to go. And we went together. He had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. And we trained together for a couple weeks, and I was addicted. I started off pretty slow. I went a couple days a week, and my brother hurt his knee, so he stopped training. He tore his ACL, so he had to get surgery and all that, stopped training, never came back. But I just kept going because I loved it so much.
What was so addicting? What was so attracting about this? Because like if I'm like as a complete third party, I'm listening to your story, and I mean, yeah, there is something like wrong with you. Like what you know what I mean? Like first, you go there, then you're very nervous. This is being painted in a very different way. Your perception is very different to what you're experiencing. You get some attention, but it seems like you get drawn in very, very fast, despite of everybody else stopping. Right?
Yeah.
Your brother stopped, your friend stopped, like all this is kind of happening. What is so attracting about jiu-jitsu?
Well, I love the physicality of it, but I also love that I was learning. And so it was mentally challenging for me. And I don't know what it is about jiu-jitsu that I love so much, but it's all of it. It's, I felt like I could still participate even though I wasn't as strong and big as everybody. They say technique conquers all, even though
I don't know. Is that a truth?
Kind of. I mean, if it was really true, I'd be able to kick my husband's ass, and I can't do that yet. So.
Is there a little rivalry going on over there?
Always. I'm always like, man, it's because you're 200 pounds and you have testosterone. Otherwise, no, but of course, technique doesn't conquer all, but we'd like to think so. And just the fact that I was able to train and learn really made me a believer. I feel like I kind of researched a little bit more. The UFC was just like a fight club that I was watching, but I didn't really understand the history. But when I learned jiu-jitsu, when I started learning, I started doing a little more research about it, and I was just fascinated. I found out there was women who trained. And I was just like super fascinated with it. So I think that's what really motivated me to keep going and learning.
Well, Celeste, there has to be some truth to this whole technique versus power. I mean, I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch ADCC this past weekend, but like all the little guys are mopping the floor, right? Like Adele, which is half of the size of all the other women in the open division, and she, I mean, whoa, like I was just blown away with what is happening, right? So there has to be some truth to that, no?
No, there's definitely some truth to it. My favorite thing about competition more than anything else is the open class. I'll always do the open class because I love the challenge, and I truly believe like, okay, if your technique is that much stronger than somebody who's bigger than you, you can pull off a win. So there's definitely some truth to it. It is more challenging, but there is some truth to it.
Why is it more challenging?
Well, if you're at a weight disparity, the other person's going to be stronger. So that kind of creates a challenge.
Have you
So
ever
you,
found yourself on the other side of that challenge, in a sense of that you facing somebody who is clearly, you know, outsides you, outweighs you, outpowers you, and you have to solve that problem?
yeah,
How difficult is that?
very difficult for
Why?
me.
Why?
Um, so it really depends on the body type and the person. So if the person is, 50 pounds heavier than me and they're, like a marshmallow, somebody who's not very athletic, right? And they're
Mhm.
not that fast. That's going to present different challenges than if you face someone who's 50 pounds heavier, taller, and super athletic, you know? So I think in jiu-jitsu, you just have to be creative. I think everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, competing a lot, I've learned, okay, like, how is this person beating me? How am I going to overcome this? So I love to develop like strategies with my husband on, okay, this girl beat me 3 times. She's 60 pounds heavier. Really putting my trust into him and myself that I can do it.
Mhm.
And so I was actually able to do that this year. And so that's really given me confidence to like not only trust him as a coach, but also as myself, really testing myself against people who are stronger and knowing that like, man, in jiu-jitsu, you can be so creative. There's always a way.
Yeah, no, that there's no doubt about that. The creativity is probably one of the biggest propellers and stoppers for the students, that depending how they use it, right?
Right.
When you look at jiu-jitsu, there's, like, in my mind at least, there's four components to it. One, there's obviously the technique, but then
Mm-hmm.
there's the weight, then there's
Mm-hmm.
power, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's speed.
Mm-hmm.
Which one out of those gives you the most challenge as far as your opponent, your partner, the other person? Which one are you really cautious about?
Definitely someone who's slower and stronger, someone who likes to hold the positions and like swallow you up little by little. Because if they can get a hold of you and slow you down, man, now you're in a lot of trouble. So, I remember when I was like a blue belt, I was watching Mackenzie Dern fight Gabby Garcia, and even
Oh,
like
yeah.
Bia Mesquita fight Gabby Garcia, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
and she beat Bia like twice, and she got hurt really bad. And then I remember Mackenzie Dern getting beat by Gabby Garcia, and then she comes out in a tournament. I can't remember which one it was, but she comes out, she beats Gabby Garcia by like a point or two. And then afterwards in the interview, she was talking with her coach, and they were saying like, look, Mackenzie had in her head that she's going to come out here and submit her and finish her. And, because she was such a challenge. And the coach was like, no, I had to, on the plane right here, I had to be like, look, it's not going to happen. You're not going to submit that girl, but you got to find a way to win. And
Yeah.
so they strategized a winning strategy for her that's, attainable. And that kind of stuck with me for a while. Like, okay, maybe, it's not always about like totally beating the person, but finding a way to beat them using strategy is, always going to be there in jiu-jitsu.
You bring up a really valid point, often underestimated, I feel like, is the strategy of jiu-jitsu. In other words, many students, they go into a training session, open training or drilling sessions, and they train the same way with every partner they have.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, well, you tell me, should we take under consideration the fact that, whoa, this person is 40 pounds heavier than me? I probably should take a different approach than with this person who is 30 pounds lighter than me. Like, should we or
Definitely.
should we not? Or should this be kind of cookie cutter and we are who we are and we just do this everything the same way?
For me, definitely not. I will always, if I'm rolling with somebody smaller, I'm going to test my guard. I'm going to pull guard. I don't want to be like on top of them, crushing them, I want to kind of even out the playing field. And in jiu-jitsu, I don't really believe that you should like label yourself. I'm a guard player or I'm a passer. You need to be well-rounded, You need to not have a fear of one or the other. So in training, that's your opportunity to challenge yourself. Like, man, with little people, for me anyway, works like little people, I'm going to pull. Big people, I'm going to try to stay on top. And sometimes I switch it up. Sometimes I'll, pull on the big person to see if I can find a way, but that's one way I kind of even out my sparring sessions.
In other words, you don't like being squashed.
Pretty much. Who likes being crushed?
I don't know. I'm just saying.
I mean, we kind of all do a little bit, but no, I definitely want to be on the winning end. Like winning and having easy training is way more fun than struggling,
Isn't it? I mean,
it's way more fun. I always tell the white belts, hey, if you really like jiu-jitsu now, you're going to really like it later. You get good at it.
Yeah, but that's a good point, right? When we are at the beginning of this, when we are white belts, even some big part of a blue belt, when we still kind of figuring this mess out, like we are getting smashed. Like there's a lot of that suffering, quote unquote. We are on the bottom a lot. Like I remember my early days, and it was like there was not one good day. It was just like it was a lot of suffering. Getting just suffocated on the bottom, right? It's that's big part of it, isn't it?
Huge part of it, yeah.
Is that what builds that resilience? Is that what gives us that drive to troubleshoot, to fix things, to overcome big challenges, physical and mental?
I think so. I think especially in the beginning when you're getting crushed all the time. When you have small victories, right? I'll never forget training and getting beat up and sometimes questioning like, man, am I really going to get good at this? But then I remember like a new person comes in, and then all of your moves all of a sudden work after a few months of training. And then like those small victories really encourage you to keep going because like, okay, this is just a few months of training. Imagine what I can do in a year,
You just mentioned that there were points in time where you questioned yourself in a sense. Can I really be good at this? Should I do this? Should I continue? Has that ever been point in your jiu-jitsu journey where you simply said, this is nonsense. Like I can't do this anymore. What am I thinking here?
No way.
No?
I've always loved jiu-jitsu and I've always been super optimistic. I really hold on to the good moments. And when I'm struggling, those are the times to like seek help. I would feel really discouraged about maybe my training session, or maybe I'm going through a lull in jiu-jitsu. And those were the times that I really utilized the people around me, and especially my professor. So I encourage everyone when they're going through stuff like that to just like mention it to your professor because they've been through it all. They've mentored, students through it all. And that's sometimes what you need to do is kind of take advantage of the support around you.
But isn't it that the time where we want to take a small break and we just want to breathe a little bit, and then that turns into more, and then more break, and then coming back is so hard. And
I don't know. Maybe for some that's true, and maybe that's why some people disappear.
Yeah.
But for me, that hasn't been true. When I have a really bad training session, I'm like, okay, for sure, I got to come back tomorrow and make it better.
I'm glad you're saying this because like that's how I've been. And I personally, like I've said this on the show and to many others, like I struggle with that part as an instructor because I have a difficult time understanding why you would take a break. Like I always been that kind of person where things are hard, I'm going to double it up. I'm going to go back. Like I need to figure this out. This bothers me that I can't do it, and sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's mental, sometimes there's not enough time. And all these life obstacles get thrown at us, and I just never envisioned the point where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go do something else. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
I feel the same way. I feel like when it's a challenge, I'll seek help. I'll ask questions, and definitely motivates me to work a little harder or to dive deeper in whatever it is that I'm studying, you know. I don't have, when I'm feeling like that, the last thing going through my mind is, oh, I want to quit now.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like, okay, I suck at this. That means I need to do it more.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only crazy one. Okay. I'm just like,
But
you
you
know,
know, you're right. There are people who get discouraged and do feel like quitting. Um, I know my husband has a couple students like that, and they need a lot of reassuring and encouragement.
do you feel jiu-jitsu is hard?
Jiu-jitsu is really hard. I wish it was easier. It gets easier, but it's still hard.
But
Yeah.
okay, let me challenge you on that. Do you really wish that jiu-jitsu was easier? Because if it was easier, everybody would do it.
Yeah, you're right. I wish it was easier for me.
Oh, I see. I see where we're going with this. I see.
Yeah.
I see.
But no, definitely the mental challenge part of it is always going to be like, I love studying new techniques and challenging myself. And there's days where, you know, I'm physically tired and I'm not going to be trying new things on people. I'm just going to stick to my bread and butter because I'm just trying to get it through the physical part of training. But
I feel like sometimes those days are the best days when you're like so depleted mentally, physically, you just don't even want to be here. And I feel like I've had some of my best days during those sessions. Like it just, you just dig deep and like you figure stuff out, and it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. Life is hard, and I believe that we can do hard things, and I don't know. But again, maybe this is why you and I crazy, and it's just what it is.
has to be.
There must be some truth
Has
to
to
all
be,
this.
but there is truth to that. Yeah, there's been times where I don't want to train and I go train and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah. A bit ago, you talked about brown belt, you being your best rank. That's where you competed. You experimented a lot. You learned a lot. You know, and as you go through that brown belt rank, that black belt comes along. The unique moment, the moment that I think all students wish for. Not many make it, but many wish for. Do you remember that day?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know it was coming?
I did. I remember sitting at breakfast with my professor and her telling me I was going to get the black belt and being like, man, really? Because like I always worked for it. I always hoped for it, was always a goal of mine. And just like when the day comes, for me anyway, I was just like, wow, I did it. And then you realize like, okay, this is just the beginning. You know, when you're going through the colored ranks and you really work hard and you hope to be a black belt one day, like it's the end all be all. And then the day comes and you're like, okay, well,
now what?
I guess this is the beginning. So,
did you feel ready for it in a sense of you knew it was coming, so there was no element of surprise. You mentally prepared for that moment. Were you ready to receive it, or was it more of a this is not my decision, perhaps I have to entrust this decision into what my professor thinks? There's many people have different feelings on this. What's your interpretation of that event?
So when it came time, I was very excited. And then I thought about it and I was pretty confident. I felt like, you know what? I'm going to do great at the black belt. I deserve it. And I could not wait to compete.
Really?
So I felt ready.
Emotional moment?
Very emotional, yes. For a couple reasons, because it's like you work so hard. For me, it was like a decade. And I think about the journey. I thought about the journey of the whole thing, you know, the whole past 10, 11 years when I got it at the time. And I felt like, man, this has been such a wonderful thing for my life. Something that I was able to do and bond with my kids. make a bunch of friendships, learn a lot, gain a lot of confidence, give a lot of myself too, just helping others, helping new people, So it was like a really fun time for me to reflect and share that experience with my professor and all my, at the time, and still are closest friends.
Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever reflected on the simple fact of if you walked out of the academy that very first day when your friend thought you are weird, if you walked out of that place and never came back, your life would look very different today than what it is.
I have.
What's your thoughts on this?
Oh my gosh. I remember, when I think about that, I'm like, oh, my life would be so bad.
Have you ever visualized what it would look like? Like, I mean, it's always interesting to think about these things.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, if I didn't go train, I would be like an overweight lawyer by now. And really miserable because I think I wanted to go into that field to study because it was something my parents wanted me to do. But deep down inside, I didn't really care about any of it. I just wanted the title of like, okay, I went to law school, I finished, I'm an attorney. But since then, I actually have a friend who went to law school. Just the depressing thought of that lifestyle and what the job would demand, I really know that, okay, that's not the path for me.
Isn't it mind-blowing? At least to me it is, how when we are younger, even in your case around 25 or so, we want this definition of success, which might equal to a law degree or medical degree, or I don't know, achieving a certain title, certain status, certain point of success. And here we are sitting across the country, talking on video, recording this conversation about how emotional receiving a 2-inch belt around your waist could be. And it seems like the satisfaction point behind one and the other, and both of them are successes. Like, we can't argue that going to completing law school is not a success, but how these things vary to different people and how differently they could be received.
Yeah. They're both huge accomplishments in totally different ways. A lot of people put them next to each other, but they're totally different.
Mm-hmm.
I know people who aren't successful in their personal lives who are amazing black belts, and I know amazing black belts who are engineers and lawyers and have a career totally outside of jiu-jitsu, and they balance both really well. And then I know obviously a lot of successful black belts who just their whole life is jiu-jitsu. So I think they're similar, but very, very much, different.
Very different. Yeah.
Very different.
Have you talked to that friend that went with you for very first time? I don't know if you keep in touch, but have you ever had a conversation with her afterwards, like years later, and like, I'm still doing this and you're not, and like,
you could have been a black belt by now.
You could have been a black belt, right? With me.
She's like, I don't care, girl. I got you to protect
nothing to do with this.
Yeah. We're still friends. Yeah, I love my little non-jiu-jitsu friends.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What
about your brother?
Weird and crazy.
Is your brother proud of you? I mean, he comes from even though wrestling is not it depends who you ask, but it's technically not a martial art. It's more of a sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, I'm sure he appreciates the craftsmanship of what jiu-jitsu brings. At least, I don't know. Let me ask you. Does he? I mean, what's his thoughts on all this? He's
so incredibly proud. He's definitely somebody who doesn't train jiu-jitsu that understands the demands of it and what a huge accomplishment it is.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I think if we took all the sports out there, and we asked all the different professionals from different sport disciplines, probably wrestlers would be the ones who would understand the grind and the technicality of what jiu-jitsu really brings. And to be honest with you, my head goes off to all the wrestlers. I don't know how they do what they do. I mean, that's a grind. Like, I was just telling I was telling a couple of my students a couple of weeks ago, is like, if you put me in a wrestling room for 5 minutes, I probably would be like crawling out of there without even like wishing being alive. These guys grind like there is no tomorrow. It's crazy.
Wrestling is a different, oh my gosh, it's so hard. It's so hard. I love wrestling. I wrestle during Nogi season and not outside of that for a reason. It's too hard. It's too hard on my body. It's just physically hard, you know? So it's a different kind of a grind. It's a different intensity.
Yep.
And those
well, the
guys
environment
are tough.
changes, right? The rules change, right? And that often dictates what we have to do, right? Like even recently, Olympics wrapped up. Like I was all glued to the screen with the wrestling. Like so fascinating watching these guys perform at the highest levels. But like, and I can really appreciate the work because I know I can imagine what it takes, and it's just mind blowing, isn't it?
There's no resting in wrestling for sure. It's like
that's why we love jiu-jitsu.
We can hang out. Yeah, jiu-jitsu, man, grapplers are lazy. If you really watch like a wrestling practice and a jiu-jitsu practice, it's almost like a joke, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
but
it is.
Huge difference.
Yeah, especially when you get your purple belt and you skip all the warm-ups, you come like it's just but what a phenomenal comparison, and so interesting always to see these guys come over and jiu-jitsu guys comparing or training with wrestlers with such a easy transferable skill, and yet so different, so different.
Yeah.
After all these years, so 2011, so that puts you at about 13 years on the mat, 13, 14, somewhere there. After all these years on the mat, do you ever think about how many people you personally have touched and impacted with this beautiful thing that you loved and you refused to quit?
I haven't thought about that, but I had a friend recently. So one of the first friends I made in jiu-jitsu, she ended up moving. We trained for a couple years and then she moved to Oregon. But we've remained friends, and we try to visit each other, see each other once or twice a year. And that's just from like a couple years of training. You know, we're both busy. We don't keep in touch very often, but I feel like when we see each other, it's like we haven't skipped a beat. And she'll always remind me that, like, man, you helped me so much when I started jiu-jitsu. You taught me a lot, and I really appreciated you at that time. And I really didn't see myself at that time as that person. So hearing that, I'm like, man, like, you really impact people's lives in a positive way, from doing something that, you know, you just like doing, and you just, you know, without thinking, help somebody that's new. You know, it makes a huge difference in the beginning, especially.
Yeah, you know what hits me the most as an instructor is when you always have conversations with people. You always have conversations with students. You know, people ask questions, students ask questions, they advise, but sometimes it's just a genuine conversation. Not that there's no intent to get better. And a few months back, one of my students came up to me and said, "Hey, do you remember the one time when we were talking about blah, blah, blah?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember. This was like months ago, you know?" And he was like, "Yeah, you know what? That conversation changed my life. I was in a really dark spot. And just a simple conversation like that really changed my perspective." And it really took me back. It really took me like off guard, because you don't know what people go through at this particular moment when you talk to them. Yet being approachable, being nice, being just simply caring person really could make a tremendous impact how they receive things and what they do in their life, isn't it?
Big time. I was in the car with my husband one time. He was talking to one of his students, and they were asking him, like, man, what do I have to be a good teacher? They were reminding him of this conversation, and he said, all you have to do is care. And I thought, like, man, that's incredible advice, because it's true. You know, if you care, everything else kind of comes naturally, and you really do impact people's lives a lot. So you're a huge influence as a teacher and a leader in the academy. So I feel like it's important, you know, that you're doing it for the right reasons and that you care, because it's a huge impact on people's lives, you know.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. So, Les, before we start wrapping this up, we've been at this for almost an hour. I don't know if you noticed. But
oh my gosh, I see here.
But before we start wrapping this up, what we do every episode, we have a question for you from a previous guest. And he didn't know that you will be answering it. So it's completely in blind. Yeah, she just asked the question knowing that it's going to be a black belt following him. That's how we know. We do this every episode. And so it happens. This is coincidental, but so it happens. I think this fits well into what we talked about today. So his question is, what is the best game to have against bigger and larger opponents?
The best game? The right game.
That's it.
Strategize, find out what their weaknesses are, capitalize on those, you know, find the hole and expose it.
See, I love this because oftentimes I think we are focusing, what do I do best? But that's only a small part of this, right? If we find out what is a weakness on the opposite side, now we can penetrate that and we can really take advantage of some of those weak points and turn everything in our favor, because ultimately that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah. I don't believe in, if you're a coach, just letting your athletes go in blind. You have to do your job, and that means like figuring out who they're going to fight. You know, I'm not saying all of them. I know there's a lot of them and there's recreation, but if you have like some serious competitors, I think as a coach, that's part of your job, figuring out who they're going to fight and really helping your athlete use their strengths against the other person's weaknesses.
I love it.
And in the open class, this is really important. Like, your coach should be walking around watching, because it's so important. And it's so much fun when you can overcome something like a size difference, you know?
You know, I wrote this down, and we changed the topic while we were talking about the open class. And let me ask you this before we finish. Let me ask you this. What is your most memorable moment in the open class particularly? Because you don't come as a big package. I would imagine that the size difference and strength played presence during some of the matches that you've had, right?
Yeah. So I was beat by a girl. She was heavyweight 2 times. So 2 tournaments go by, and I'm like starting to get really discouraged. And I'm like, man, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I've tried this, I've tried that, you know? And then it's really about, you know, for me, it was about trusting my coach, so my husband at the time, and doing what he said. You know, when you're husband and wife, you don't always agree, right? And so like sometimes I'm like, man, he doesn't really know. But in that moment, I just like shut my mouth, like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I did exactly what he said, and I had, you know, finally beat a girl who I felt like was just better than me, bigger than me. And that for me gave me so much confidence and like trust in him too. So that's my advice, you know.
Good for
Trust
you.
your coach, create a strategy, and believe in yourself.
Good for you. I love it. I love it.
Thanks.
Celeste, if anybody wants to reach out to you, if anybody wants to connect with you, are you available on social media? If anybody's listening to this and says, this is a cool story, I would love to reach out and connect. Where are you available?
So I'm on Instagram, Celeste Cronin Fit. So reach out to me there, and I'd love to answer any questions you guys have, and follow my journey. Share yours.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing your story. I always appreciate the openness of guests and willingness to really be vulnerable and sharing some of the stories. Some of them are easy fun and some of them are not. And that's kind of what life is. I truly look as part of us as leaders is really sharing the experiences we've had so others can learn from them. And that's what you've done today. And I truly do appreciate all that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Let's wrap this up for today.
Alrighty, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Raw Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.